Funding for the Maddy Report is made possible by grants from the Spencer family, Community Health System, Harris Ranch Resort, Producers Dairy, Valley Children's Healthcare, and The Wonderful Company. Additional support provided by from the Maddy Institute, the Public Policy Institute for the Valley's public universities. This is the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Blake Zanti.
Welcome to the Maddy Report. I'm Blake Zanti, Executive Director of the Maddy Institute. Today we'll be discussing a local perspective on immigration in the Central Valley and the calls for immigration reform from two Fresno County Supervisors, Luis Chavez and Nathan Magsig. While the County of Fresno does not have jurisdiction over federal issues like immigration, local public officials have been vocal about immigration over the last several months. Supervisor Chavez recently authored an op-ed advocating for a path forward on immigration reform, and Supervisor Magsig recently authored a resolution as a representative of the National Association of Counties, or NACO, to urge the federal government to pursue immigration reform as well. We've invited the two of them on the program to provide a local perspective. Supervisors Chavez and Magsig, thanks for joining the Maddy Report today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we have a lot of issues to dive into in a little bit of time, so let's begin. Now, serving as a county supervisor is a nonpartisan office in Fresno County, but I think most folks are familiar with your perspectives on politics and your political leanings. Supervisor Chavez, you're a registered Democrat. Supervisor Magsig, you're a registered Republican. And looking at each of your districts, how have recent actions by the President's administration affected your respective districts in Fresno County? Why don't we start with you, Supervisor Chavez?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the invitation, Blake. It is a very important issue, and you know, let's kind of backtrack a little bit farther. So if you recall, early in January, during the Biden administration, there were a number of raids that occurred here in the Central Valley, then carried over by President Trump's administration. And that kind of threw a little bit of a curveball to our local folks here. We subsequently had a summit over at the Fresno County Farm Bureau just to kind of hear from our ag folks what was going on, and understanding that we're such a big agricultural county, $8 billion that we generate yearly. When they had shortages of anywhere from 25 to 40% of folks that were scared to go to the fields, the agricultural industries, food packing houses, processing plants, that's a problem for us. And so that was one of the reasons that I wanted to write this op-ed, to kind of highlight the issue, but more importantly, focus on solutions, right? We want to be able to do something for folks that have been here a long time and have a pathway for them to, you know, get documentation. Dreamers, too, I think, is a big part that has consensus, bipartisan effort. There was a bill last year that made its way through both chambers, subsequently did not pass. So I'm hopeful that this conversation sparks that true comprehensive immigration reform effort that we need at the federal level.
And Supervisor Magsig, looking at your district, what are some of the things that you're hearing and the concerns that you're hearing in your district?
Well, again, I represent a lot of very rural areas, agricultural areas, and again, when you look at comprehensive immigration reform, we haven't seen anything out of Washington for over 50 years. And at the county level right now, there's 58 counties in California. You look at our hospital systems, you look at our schools, you look at our social and safety net programs that we have, and there are billions upon billions of dollars that are being spent on individuals that are here in California that are undocumented. So really, Congress needs to act, and the resolution which was passed at NACO, and there was significant debate from all 50 states, but really NACO is calling on Washington, on our congressmen, to really engage, to begin to create some meaningful dialogue in this space, because the nation is ready for it. And for me, I want people in this country who want to contribute to it, who want to pay their fair share, want to pay their taxes, and individuals who aren't going to be a burden on our safety net services.
Now, immigration is governed by the federal government, largely by the Immigration and Nationality Act, as well as parts of the Constitution. We have, you know, various laws and policies that make it very clear with regard to our laws on immigration, yet we also have 11 million undocumented individuals living in the U.S. So we only have about a minute left to answer this, and I realize we don't have enough time, but how did we get to this point in our country? Why don't we start with you, Supervisor Magsig?
So over the last 50 years, we've seen different administrations in the White House sending mixed signals. We've had some presidents who have been in office who've been very strict when it comes to immigration, and then others, the Biden administration more recently kind of signaled to people around the world, hey, come to this country, we'll turn a blind eye, and we're going to have kind of weak border security. And we have President Trump, who's in office now, who says we need to have strict border security. So because of those mixed signals being sent, we now have, like you say, millions of people in this country illegally.
And Supervisor Chavez, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very bipolar relationship in this country with immigration. With one hand, we weigh folks that come in and, serve our economy, which is hospitality, agricultural, service industry. But then with the other hand, we tell them they can't be part of our community. They can't be part of our country. And so we want workers, we get families. And so we end up with this dynamic that we now have, which, by the way, I think both parties have not delivered what was promised even 5-6 years ago. And my colleague is right. The last time this happened was 1986 under President Reagan, where he actually enacted comprehensive immigration reform. Part of my op-ed was to spark the conversation that right now we're spending about $17,000 to arrest and deport one individual. What if we turn that around and actually had a pathway for folks to pay a fine, whatever that amount is, $3,000, $5,000, on the 11 million folks that we have? That would generate billions of dollars. So I think we can use this as an opportunity to actually flip the script and not have it be a burden on taxpayers, but more a benefit for our community as a whole.
Thank you both. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll dive into this issue a little bit more. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. Thanks again, Supervisors Magsig and Chavez, for being on the Maddy Report today. Let's talk a little bit more about what we were talking about in the previous segment, immigration reform. Both of you have been outspoken about this issue recently. Supervisor Chavez, you wrote an op-ed in GV Wire and stated that it costs American taxpayers roughly $17,000 to arrest, process, transport, and deport one undocumented individual. Let's start with your op-ed. Why is it important that immigration policies are reformed? And would you just briefly summarize your article to the viewers today?
Yeah, I mean, it was very simple. I think a pathway, a process that is, a lot more easier to follow than it is today, and really more humane, in my view. We have children, we have families that have been here for decades. We have business owners, by the way, and homeowners that sadly don't have documentation. And then we have individuals under the category of dreamers that have been in our communities and our universities that are contributing. So my purpose was really to provide that process and codify what would that actually look like in practical terms, and then have that opportunity where we can actually generate revenue instead of having it be a tax burden for our residents. I'm hopeful that this conversation leads to, I think right now we're so focused on the border security, on the immigration, crackdown, but at some point we're gonna have to pivot and address the folks that are here that, quite honestly, it's not possible for them to go back to a country that they've never known. So for the folks out there that read the op-ed or didn't, that's kind of a little bit of a snapshot, addressing the issue, but focusing on solutions, I think is going to be the next step.
And similarly, Supervisor Magsig, you're also trying to pursue some advocacy and solutions through your role as well. You recently shared about your resolution regarding immigration reform, which supports creating a legal pathway for non-U.S. citizens to work in the country more easily. Could you just help us understand the resolution, maybe the role of NACO, the National Association of Counties as well, and how would this legislation benefit Fresno County as a whole?
So NACO represents all counties across the entire United States. There's 3,069 counties. And so NACO advocates on behalf of all counties across the U.S. in Washington every year. And so yearly there are resolutions that are presented. Most resolutions don't actually make it to the Board of Directors and then are implemented into policy for NACO, but this comprehensive immigration reform resolution did pass, and all counties were very vocal about the need for reform. So really what my resolution did is it recognizes that right now a lot of the people who are here in the country illegally, they use a lot of our safety net services, they're in our schools, they're part of our communities, and a lot of it is extremely expensive. And right now Washington is cutting back and making making a lot of these individuals ineligible for federal funds and in some cases state funding. Well, that's falling on the backs then of county governments, and so it's becoming very expensive. So this resolution just identified that counties are the ones that are bearing the burden of having to pay for a lot of these services for these individuals, and Washington needs to engage. Bottom line is, this country needs workers from other countries, and we need to create a pathway where these individuals can have green cards. Individuals who want to contribute to our economy, pay taxes, they need to be here, but pathways where they're paying their fair share need to be created, and so that's what the resolution focused on. And again, it was a bipartisan resolution, just recognizing the challenges that we face, because right now what we're seeing so much is Republicans and Democrats are fighting over this issue, but there are no solutions that are coming forward. So this is a call for real solutions and change.
Before we go to a quick break, do you think that there is common ground on this issue? Could bipartisan consensus be found? What's your take, Supervisor Magsig? You have Luis Chavez and myself, who both are from different ends of the political spectrum. If we can sit here and talk about these issues together, the answer is absolutely yes. And your perspective?
Absolutely, and I'll use a quick example. Just when we had the summit over at the Fresno County Farm Bureau, we had folks from all different industries, dairy, ag, and there was consensus on having a pathway, but also having a guest worker program that has been talked about a lot. I think those are the areas that we can focus on, and I'll use our friend, our former president's saying, Ronald Reagan. He said, somebody that disagrees with you 90% of the time is still 10% your friend. I think we can find common ground in that 10%.
Thank you. We're going to go to another quick break, and we'll be right back with Supervisors Nathan Magsig and Luis Chavez. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. We were talking about immigration a little bit ago. Now let's dive into some other county issues. Before this show, we were talking a little bit about your Second Amendment resolution. It's been in the news as well, that the county sponsored and passed. Why don't you talk about this resolution and maybe just help the viewers understand why did it come about and what was really in that resolution? Why don't we start with you, Supervisor Magsig?
Sure. So several months ago, the California Rifle and Pistol Association approached me and they said, hey, we're very interested in having a resolution that deals with the Second Amendment because we're coming up on the 249th anniversary of this nation being founded. And how important, of course, the Bill of Rights are. But the Second Amendment, you couldn't have any of the other, really the Bill of Rights, you couldn't have any of the other amendments without the Second Amendment. And so they approached me and we put together a resolution, and I wanted to reach out, and Luis Chavez and myself, we worked together on this particular resolution that just recognized the significance of the Second Amendment. CRPA is a great organization that really focuses on educating the public about their rights and just gun ownership in general. And so if you look at the millions, the tens of millions of people here in the United States that are owners of guns, it was an important time right around the 4th of July to remind people about how significant the Bill of Rights are, but more specifically the Second Amendment.
And Supervisor Chavez, you co-sponsored this resolution. You're also, this is traditionally a more Republican issue, but there was bipartisan consensus on this. Could you talk a little bit about, your reasoning for co-sponsoring it and maybe a little bit about the resolution?
Yeah, I mean, obviously myself being a gun owner, and it's no secret, I've gone through the CCW process here locally. I learned how to hunt when I was a kid, when I lived on the farm with my family. And so that was something very important to me. But oftentimes this issue gets polarized by folks because I think oftentimes we see, the headlines where there's a shooting or an incident somewhere. But at the end of the day, it's about responsible gun ownership. And so some of the language that we included in there included those provisions in there. We want to keep guns away from children that are not, authorized, don't have a supervising adult, or don't have permission. We want to keep guns away from criminals. And I think the part that's frustrating for me is that oftentimes here in California, we restrict those rights for law-abiding people, but yet we don't, factor in the fact that criminals don't follow the law. It's very easy for a criminal to go out and get a ghost gun for, $150, $200, but yet a law-abiding, citizen can't go in there and purchase a gun to defend themselves or their family. And we know that law enforcement can't be everywhere, all the time. And so I think for me, what shaped that too was, if you recall a couple of years ago, there was a burglary that occurred in my house. The individual came back. I chased him. Had I not had something to protect myself with, this individual was carrying a large knife. Who knows what would have happened? And so I'm all for people being able to, exercise their right and defend themselves and their family. And I think there's consensus in that space too.
Now, playing devil's advocate a little bit here, but we were talking about immigration reform. Are we in a place in the United States where maybe there is potential for gun reform? That there are many advocates who push for that type of reform and say the Second Amendment needs to be updated. Is that something that you believe is right, or would you push back against that?
I would say that any provision or law that infringes on that basic fundamental right is not okay. However, I am open to, I think we should have background checks. I think we should have training. Like, for example, anybody that goes through the CCW training is familiar with this. You have to go, whether you go through the city or the county, it's either 8, 16 hours now with the change in law. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It also has marksmanship qualifications. You have to be able to know how to actually shoot the weapon and operate it safely. And then gun storage. That's, I think, to me, one of the most critical parts of this, because oftentimes the tragedies that we hear out there have been because somebody left that weapon where it was accessible to an individual that should not have had that weapon. So there's space there to have a conversation, but I think the fundamental right for people to own weapons needs to be there.
Supervisor Magsig, your perspective.
Yeah, so I think law-abiding citizens should have as much liberty as possible, and it really comes down to accountability. So I don't think the Second Amendment needs to change at all, or the Bill of Rights in general. And to me, I'm one who believes that government really needs to be limited. And when government's limited, it requires the public to be more responsible and accountable. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing right now is an eroding of liberties and freedoms, and there's an expectation from many for government to get bigger, and that really conflicts with what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they created this country. So again, I do not support eroding the Second Amendment at all.
Well, thank you both. We're going to go to a quick break, and then we'll be right back after this. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. Thanks again, Supervisors Chavez and Magsig, for being on the Maddy Report today. Let's talk a little bit about the Fresno County budget, which was recently passed. It's a large budget, and obviously we were talking a little bit before this about how spending in Washington and Sacramento has a direct impact on what the county does or is not able to do. So maybe walk us through what was the budget, what was in the budget, how big was it, and what are some of the tangible impacts that we're feeling right now here in the Valley from some of the spending or not spending cuts, rather, in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Why don't we start with you, Supervisor Magsig?
Sure. So what you saw a couple of weeks ago at the county level, we actually did not pass the budget, but we basically did kind of like a continuing resolution where we authorized continued spending. The budget at the county begins October 1st and will end the end of September. But our budget right now that we currently are operating within is $5.2 billion. And it sounds very large, but a lot of those funds come from state and federal sources. From a lot of our programs are subvented, meaning that there are revenue streams that come from state and federal government that pass through the county and then go out to provide services to the public. The largest single department that we have at the county, and we've got about 20 of them, is the Department of Social Services. They're over $1.5 billion in just how they operate. They've got about 2,700 employees. So they are the single largest department at the county level, but they also are the most reliant on state and federal spending. So what we're seeing right now in Washington with the One Big Beautiful Bill is there are huge reforms that are coming to both the SNAP and Medicaid programs. And so in the future, there's going to be more reliance on administrative costs being fully burdened at the local level. We don't know the full impact of that yet, but it will be millions of dollars. But the county budget is extremely complex. If you look at our discretionary revenue that we have, typically it's right around $400 million, so less than 10% of the revenue we have is discretionary. So as we continue to move through the budget process, we're going to be keeping a very sharp eye on what takes place in Sacramento and Washington.
And Supervisor Chavez, what's your take?
Yeah, I said this the other day to my colleague. Fresno County and all counties are kind of like the hub, and all other agencies and entities are the spokes. And I say that because we're the only local entity that administers federal, state, educational programs. And we're at the center of everything. I think the stat is over 52% of folks in Fresno County receive some kind of service from our services department. And so when you look at the budget and now it's focused on contracting at the federal and the state level. And it's important to note that because we have a big challenge coming up where the voters actually passed Prop 36. And there was zero funding included from the state. So what does that mean for us locally now with regards to public safety, with regards to social services? We're going to have to triage, and that's why, this last meeting that we had, we gave direction to our CAO to come back with a list of what these implications mean for our folks. Folks that get SNAP or Medicare and other health programs, we're going to have to triage, and we're going to have to prioritize some. And unfortunately, we're going to have to cut areas that we just don't have funding to provide those services. And right now you see the need going up, right? Because the economy is not doing that great. Inflation obviously is still a problem. And so you have people on fixed incomes. I think for me, the priority will be, senior citizens that are on Social Security, the vulnerable people with health conditions and vulnerabilities. I'm going to really be looking at how we can actually help those folks. Able-bodied individuals, I think, can always find a way, but I think for me, those need to be priorities for our budget.
Well, Supervisors Magsig and Chavez, thanks for being on the Maddy Report today. Really appreciate your time. And it's also encouraging, the Maddy Institute is nonpartisan, but also promotes bipartisanship. And so it's encouraging to see local officials working together from different sides of the aisle to advocate for solutions. So thank you both for your time today.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for tuning into the Maddy Report. To learn more about the Maddy Institute, visit themaddyinstitute.org. What makes a community thrive? How do we bridge the gap between government and policy and the people it impacts? The Maddy Institute was founded to answer questions like these, to create a link between government and the citizens it serves, and to inspire a new generation of leaders dedicated to public service. Our mission is threefold. 1, to promote more effective and inclusive government. 2, to encourage civic engagement. And 3, to conduct research on key issues impacting the Central Valley. Through these efforts, we aim to educate, inspire, and empower the next generation of public servants and community leaders. At the heart of everything we do is a belief that good governance requires an informed and engaged public. From nurturing young leaders to fostering dialogue, the Maddy Institute is dedicated to creating a future where the people of the Central Valley can thrive. Join us as we continue Senator Maddy's legacy. Together, we can build a brighter future, one informed and engaged citizen at a time. The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about today's episode of the Maddy Report, please visit our website at maddyinstitute.com.